Right, good morning. May I ask you to take your seats, please? I call the meeting of the General Committee on Democracy, Human Rights and Humanitarian Questions to order. First thing is the agenda. The agenda for this meeting has been distributed. Could I please invite you to adopt the agenda? Are there any objections to adopting the agenda? Right, the agenda is adopted. Now we have one main item, which is ensuring the safety of journalists in conflict zones. I think you have the list of the amendment before you. There are no amendments to this item. I don't think any amendments have been put in. So I give the floor to Mr. Whittingdale to sponsor this draft resolution. John.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm pleased to be able to speak in support of the proposal for a supplementary item on the safety of journalists in conflict zones. And before I come to my main remarks, I wanted to share with delegates a video which was prepared by the United Kingdom's Society of Editors. And the video pays tribute to some of the journalists who have already lost their lives in Ukraine. So could I ask the technicians to start the video?
Go. Move.
Mr. Chair, that video was first aired on the 11th of May, and I'm afraid that the figures quoted in the video have now been surpassed by further deaths and further atrocities. Ukraine is obviously very much in our thoughts, but actually journalists are under threat and are risking their lives in a large number of countries around the world. The media play an absolutely vital role in a functioning democracy. A free media is an essential part to play in holding governments to account, exposing corruption, and countering disinformation. Already, we know this year that 29 journalists and 2 media assistants have been killed during the course of their work. 8 of those, as we've seen, were killed in Ukraine, another 8 in Mexico, and there has also been violence against journalists in Hong Kong and Ethiopia, and of course in Russia. Every country has more to do to protect journalists. I'm pleased that in the United Kingdom we have risen in the World Press Freedom Index from number 33 to number 24, although to some extent that was because of the deteriorating situation in so many other countries. But I would like to congratulate our Scandinavian colleagues from Norway, Denmark and Sweden, which once again hold the top 3 places in the list of countries ranked in order of media freedom. But there is now a record number on the index of companies where the situation is, quote, very bad. It is 28. And 85% of people around the globe now live in countries where press freedom has been constricted further in the last 5 years. In the UK, we prepared, when I was a minister, I was responsible for drawing up a national action plan to increase protection of journalists. And we also, with Canada, founded the Global Media Freedom Coalition. That coalition has now been supported by 50 countries, and I would hope that that number will continue to grow. Some specific examples. The 2 countries where we are perhaps most conscious here of where media freedom is under threat. The first is Ukraine, and the second is Russia, and I want to give just an example of each of those. In Russia, Elena Kostyurchenko, a reporter at Novaya Gazeta, was beaten up, and since she has been working at that paper, she has seen 4 of her colleagues murdered. In Ukraine, journalists have been under threat since before the Russian invasion. Ukrainska Pravda was founded by Elena Pritula and Georgy Gongadze to expose corruption in the year 2000. A few months after it was founded, Gongadze disappeared, and a couple of months later, his headless body was found in a field. Elena Pritola was advised to leave, but she did not. She stayed, and she established a relationship with another journalist, Pavel Sheremet. And in July 2016, he was blown up in her car, which he was driving at the time. Journalists around the world are risking their lives in order to cast a spotlight on what is happening in their countries. And the purpose of our resolution today is to emphasize the legal protections which are set out in international law, as well as the resolutions of the United Nations. And this item is particularly guided by the work of the OSCE representative on freedom of the media, Teresa Ribeiro of Portugal. And it's especially appropriate this year, being the 25th anniversary of the mandate of the representative. Last month, Ms. Ribeiro published a report on media freedom across the OSCE, which unfortunately highlighted that violations of the OSCE's common principles and commitments are unprecedented in scale. Colleagues will also be aware that the OSCE are launching a project on the safety of journalists this month. The objective of the project is to assist OSCE member states in strengthening the fulfillment of relevant OSCE principles and commitments in regard to the safety of journalists. And I hope that this resolution today will contribute to this work and focus attention on the safety of journalists operating in conflict zones. As you have seen, the text emphasizes the vital nature of press coverage to the collection and sharing of reliable information about conflict. I was pleased to accept the invitation of Madam President, to become the Assembly's Special Rapporteur on War Crimes. And there is no question that the reason we know about some of the appalling atrocities taking place in Ukraine is because of the courage of the journalists who are reporting there and bringing the world's attention to what is going on. The text of a resolution expresses concern at the continuing threats and dangers faced by journalists, including the reports of deliberate attacks, kidnapping, and torture. The text proposes that the Assembly urge all participating states to ensure the safety of journalists in conflict zones and encourages participating states to sign the Media Freedom Pledge. It condemns all violence, and particularly we remember those journalists who have lost their lives, the roll call we saw earlier of the 8 who already died. It is essential that those who are responsible are held to account. The resolution urges the OSCE representative on freedom of the media to monitor and report on the safety of journalists, and I hope that that will form part of the work which has been launched by this month. And finally, it calls for an open and committed dialogue among governments, non-state groups, journalists and other interested parties to strengthen protections to promote the safety of and respect for those reporting on a conflict. Mr. Chair, I do believe that this is an incredibly important matter at any time, but at a time when war is raging in Europe, it is vital that people know what is taking place there. And for that reason, it is all the more important that we increase the protection of those risking their lives to bring that about through increasing the safety of journalists. And on that basis, I urge the Assembly to support the supplementary item.
Thank you very much indeed. Before we open up the debate, two things. At the end of the debate, when we voted to accept or otherwise the resolution, we'll be then voting for the elections for the various committee places. So please don't leave, because you can vote here. Secondly, if anybody wants to add their name, I have a list of speakers. Please could you do it right away before I close the list of speakers. The time limit for speeches in this debate is 3 minutes. And I think that'll give us plenty of time, and the floor is now open for debate. May I first invite from the Ukraine, Ms. Yehuna Kravchuk, to start the debate.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dear colleagues, I'm really honored that I can open this debate, because I'm a journalist myself, and I'm heading the subcommittee on informational policy back in Ukraine. And I knew personally some of these people, pictures that you saw during the video. I would like to thank John Whittingale to bring this topic to discussion. 8 journalists were killed when they were fulfilling their duties. They were working. But total number of killed journalists is 33. Because some of them joined armed forces. They put down the microphone, took the gun, because they want to defend their countries. Some of the journalists, as our mutual friend was Maketa Virahirich, was killed in Kiev when she was sitting in her kitchen in a residential apartment building. And Russian missile hit this residential apartment building. She probably could have been alive if she left the country, but she had a duty to fulfill and to work as a journalist and bring you truth. And I want to tell you the story of Max Levin. Max Levin is a famous photographer, I can't even say was, because I still feel that he's alive. He's a famous photographer, and he went to Kiev region with his drone to take the pictures. And it's also the part of the job of journalists, because they're filming war crimes. He was taken by Russian soldiers and executed with cold blood. Reporters Without Borders made investigations and found even a bullet with what he was killed. And when I'm asking my colleagues, journalists from other countries, do you see the difference? You covered different wars. What is the difference? Do you see the difference? And they say, we never saw such cruel war, and we never saw that when you have press written on your back, on your chest, that doesn't protect you, that makes you a target, because Russians are afraid of truth. Those people that were killed and those hundreds that are working in Ukraine are bringing truth to you. So you would know what's happening and you would know what crimes are being committed in Ukraine. And also what Russians do, they target TV towers to get off the Ukrainian TV, to get off Ukrainian media, and to put Russian propaganda to fool the people. Because journalists are also bringing hope. When people come from occupied territories to liberated areas, they say that Russians are lying to us, that Ukraine had fallen, Kiev is seized, Zelensky had fled, all of them fled, but then when they come and they read what journalists write, that gives them hope. So next time, if you are being asked to save Putin's face, just remember the stories of these journalists that were executed with cold blood because they were bringing truth. Thank you so much.
Thank you for that. Now, Mr. Anton from Spain, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to speak in Spanish. Bueno, probablemente el momento de la historia con más, digamos que, potencia y capacidad comunicativa, hay que decir que no está siendo tampoco el momento de la mejor información. Creo que bueno, se está viendo en muchos países y creo que uno de los desafíos fundamentales que tenemos en las democracias actuales es precisamente ser capaces de mantener prensa con independencia y autonomía, no solo de los gobiernos, sino también de los poderes económicos, ¿no? Y creo que eso es una medida de nuestras democracias. Más todavía un escenario de guerra. Creo que bueno, el vídeo que hemos visto al iniciar, conocemos toda la situación de vulneración sistemática del derecho a la información por parte de la Federación Rusa contra periodistas de diferentes países y, en definitiva, siempre se dice además que la primera víctima de una guerra es la verdad y es la información. Y creo que bueno, tenemos que reforzar nuestros esfuerzos, en definitiva, para que no sea así en este conflicto ni en ningún otro conflicto. Vengo además de un país donde tenemos todavía muy presentes situaciones que se dieron en otros conflictos, por ejemplo, una situación no resuelta que fue también la muerte de un periodista español en Irak, José Couso, y ahora mismo pues, estamos digamos, siguiendo con especial preocupación las vulneraciones descritas en este informe y también otras situaciones que se dan, no solo digamos, en Ucrania, sino, por ejemplo, nos preocupa la situación de un periodista español, Pablo González, que también lleva 4 meses retenido, a nuestro juicio, digamos que, bueno, sin la claridad necesaria. En definitiva, creo que es muy pertinente esta moción. Evidentemente, pues vamos a apoyarla y creo que tenemos que hacer todos los esfuerzos en nuestra mano para que el derecho a la información no sea, digamos, como dije antes, pues la primera víctima de una situación de guerra como la que estamos viviendo.
Thank you very much indeed for that. And the next speaker is Mr. Felov from Ukraine. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Dear colleagues, it should be no surprise to you at this point that this violent Russian invasion of Ukraine is not only a threat to Ukrainian territorial sovereignty, but also a challenge to human rights mechanism and to democracy of the world. One of the pillars of democracy is protection of free speech. To cite the Bible, the truth shall set you free. Russia does not want the world to see the truth. They hide their actions with lies, manipulate facts, and blame their crimes on others. They know that when the truth gets out, everyone will know that Russia has no respect for international humanitarian law, for human rights, for fundamental freedoms of people. Ukraine is forever grateful and offers deepest respect to each and every journalist, both domestic and foreign, that risk their lives and goes on the front lines to show the world the truth about this war. to show the violent efforts of the Ukrainian army that protects our land and our loved ones and Europeans, to show that Russian army has discarded humanism and mercy and instead show cruelty to everything and everyone they encounter in their way. Ukraine works hard to protect journalists in this terrible war to destroy Ukrainians. This struggle to bring the truth to the whole world is no less important than the struggle on the front line. That is why I was one of the first to find out from my friend, member of Ukrainian Parliament Ruslan Gorbenko, about the tragic death of Frederick Leclerc Imhoff, a French journalist. My colleague should have been in that car on that tragic day near Severodonetsk, had it not been for the meeting of the Ukrainian Parliament. After all, he, like many of us, bought the armored car with his own funds, which, by the way, was previously used by the Royal Mint of the United Kingdom. This car, in which Mr. Leclerc Imhoff died, previously saved the lives of several hundred Ukrainian civilians who were evacuated from the places of hostilities, as well as many journalists who traveled to the hostility zone and were fired upon with small arms. The Ukrainian military has always asked journalists to sit in the safest place behind the driver, but the courage and professional interest of many reporters to show the World War as it really is makes this profession heroic and at the same time so dangerous to life. On that terrible day, a shell of a 155 millimeters howitzer exploded 4 meters from the car. Such explosion usually destroy tank turrets. For the Russians, it makes no difference whether they shoot at children, women, the elderly, or journalists. We support the initiative to protect journalists, and that is why we set a standard in our national legislation for the personal protection of journalists who cover events in hotspots. According to this bill, passed in the first reading, periodicals and media are obliged to provide protective equipment for their employees who are sent close to the points of collision. In addition, I personally presented a legislative initiative to pay 1 million hryvnias to the families of journalists killed in the line of duty. Our state must take care of the civilian heroes of this war, among whom reporters are in the leading place. And we urge other members of the Assembly to do the same in their respective legislation. Protect the truth, and it shall set you free. On behalf of the Ukrainian delegation, I thank the author of this resolution and ask for a moment of silence to honor the memory of more than 33 journalists from Ukraine, France, the United States, Lithuania, and other countries who were killed by the Russian invaders in this terrible war. Thank you.
Right, thank you. I think perhaps we can have a moment of silence when we finish the debate, if you agree. Let's hear the other speakers first, okay?
Thank you.
Can I say the speakers list should now be closed? The next speaker is from Azerbaijan, Ms. Agayeva. I call Ms. Agayeva from Azerbaijan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, dear colleagues. I'd like to underline that the issue of safety of journalists is crucial. Milestone documents on this very topic are the UN Security Council resolutions 1738 and 2222, according to which journalists in armed conflicts are classified as civilians, and as such should be afforded the same protection as applicable to civilians, provided that they take no action adversely affecting their status as civilians. This was also affirmed by the OCE participating states in the OCE Milan Ministerial Council decision. In this regard, it's of crucial significance that all journalists, media professionals, and associated personnel exercise maximum care and avoid any action that would undermine their status as a civilian in the conflict zone. Accreditation of journalists is in OCE commitments starting from the Helsinki Final Act and is another important mechanism for ensuring safe working conditions under which journalists from one participating state exercise their profession in another state. The Helsinki Final Act stipulates that procedures for arranging travel by journalists are subject to the observance of regulations, including, for instance, those relating to the existence of areas closed for security reasons. We would like to remind that as a result of the mine explosion in June 2021, 2 Azerbaijani journalists and a representative of the local executive authority were killed. 4 other civilians were seriously injured. This tragic incident is a stark reminder of the urgent need to provide all accurate information of landmines in the formerly occupied territories of Azerbaijan. For 3 decades, Armenia indiscriminately planted landmines in these territories and transformed them into one of the most contaminated areas in the world. Today, persistent mines planted by Armenia continue killing civilians, including journalists, create additional obstacles for the return of IDPs, and seriously impede wide-ranging rehabilitation and reconstruction efforts. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. And the last speaker is from the United States, Ms. Jackson Lee, please.
Thank the very thoughtful proponent of this resolution, Mr. Whittendale, and really offer both a moment of pain and joining in with brothers and sisters in Ukraine, the list of journalists that have been lost who are Ukrainian and all others who have come. I think as Americans, we obviously first felt the pain of this very vicious war from the enormity of the journalists who told the story consistent with our love of the First Amendment and our Constitution of the freedom of speech. And as the chair of the Congressional Children's Caucus in the United States Congress, to be able to see more than 200 children that were killed, but also little children sitting at the very feet of the bodies of their parents or family members. This is what journalism has done in galvanizing the world behind Ukraine in this very vicious and unnecessary war. And so Russia's brutality has only been able to be described by the richness of the bravery of journalists. This resolution speaks to the necessity of ensuring that actions against journalists generate war crimes, in addition calling to the end of intentional attacks against journalists, and as I indicated, the importance of press in covering the conflict. But I do want to take note that Russia's brutal war against Ukraine has drastically increased the risk for journalists, and Reporters Without Borders stated the Russian troops have deliberately murdered, for example, Max Levin, a Ukrainian photojournalist. They've been wounded and killed. And so I hope, as others have signed the Media Freedom Pledge, as the United States has done, that we enthusiastically support this resolution. But I hope as member states that we'll go back and exercise additional authority in our parliaments and our Congress in this instance to reaffirm our commitment to the freedom of press and the protection of media that is in foreign war zones, and that we will condemn unequivocally all violence against journalists, and that we will do this on the floor of our respective houses, as I hope to do, and urges all of us that are part of the freedom of the media to ensure every day that we call out Russia's violence and that we cite the bravery, the courage of our journalists who go in places where they are not welcomed. Finally, it's a moment of privilege just to thank the journalists who brought to the attention of this body Brittany Griner, held as a hostage in Russia, and only her story and the letter that she has written about her absolute fear of being in Russia has come to light because of journalists' bravery in telling the story of this young woman, an Olympian who has been wrongfully held, cruelly held in Russian jails, which we are fighting every day to get her out and to get her released along with others of our foreign prisoners. Only journalists can tell those stories because the Russian people are not hearing the truth. And we want to cite that as our honor to journalists today. I yield back.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much indeed. Let me just remind you where we are. We're now going to go through the supplementary item. When we've decided and voted on it, I then want to have a moment of silence as a tribute to the journalists who've lost their lives. And then please remember that afterwards we'll be voting for the positions on the third committee. Okay, so please stay. Right, we now need to consider the whole supplementary item. I suggest we take all items 1 to 17 paragraphs together. Does anybody want a separate vote on those paragraphs? If not, we'll take them all together. Can I see those in favor? Thank you very much. Any abstentions? Right. And we're now going to vote for the overall draft resolution. I want to propose we now formally vote on this. Would those in favor of adopting the draft resolution as amended, please raise their voting cards. There are no amendments. Right. Those in favor of the draft resolution on journalist safety? Thank you. Anybody against? Any abstentions? The draft resolution is adopted. Could we now stand for a moment of silence as a tribute to the journalists who've lost their lives in the conflict? Thank you very much. Right. We now come to the last bit of business, which is the election of committee officers for the 2022 annual session. Now we have let me just tell you where we are. I'm not sure we've been able to distribute the list because we were taking names till the last minute. For the post of chair of this committee, we have 2 contenders, Mr. Nikolai Samkaradze from Georgia and Mr. Kyrianos Hajiani from Cyprus. For the other posts, there's just one name for each. For vice chair, there's Ms. Farama Karimi from the Netherlands, and for rapporteur, Mr. Johan Buser of Sweden. So we just have to have a vote for the chair. And I'm going to ask for the voting system to be explained.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. So we'll now proceed to the secret ballot for the position of chair. I'll remind again the 2 candidates that have been proposed are Mr. Samkaradze from Georgia and Mr. Hajiani from Cyprus. I think, did you want to give an opportunity for them to address the?
Yes, if either or both of you would like to say a word, you are welcome to do that. From Georgia, would you like to say a word? Yes, not obligatory. Not obligatory.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. It's it's awkward to sit in the front row with my back turned to all the delegations and asking for support to those delegations, but I didn't choose that setup, so sorry. Dear colleagues, I'm Nicolas Samharadze. I'm 43 years old, father of a son and a daughter. Prior to my election to the Parliament of Georgia and joining this assembly, I worked in development field as program manager in different international organizations for 15 years, including the EU and United Nations Development Program. I also have an academic background. I'm a professor of international relations at Tbilisi State University, where I have been teaching for 13 years now and still enjoying it. I have extensive experience in election field, being one of the co-authors of election reform, working closely with OSCE or DEAR, and also a lot of election observation missions with this organization, but also with the Council of Europe and the European Union previously. And this experience really broadened my understanding of the problems that democracy and free and fair elections are facing in our region. Georgia is a frontline state which has been attacked by Russia exactly for choosing democracy and human rights as its way of life. And we have first-hand experience of humanitarian catastrophes happening in our own country, and we are well aware of the indispensability of joint international response. And coming from the Black Sea region, which has witnessed dramatic upheavals in the last decades, I bring the experience of fighting aggression and occupation, countering hybrid threats, mediation and confidence building in divided societies, economic development, success stories in modernizing state, and building democratic institutions all at the same time. Therefore, I think these factors of this combination of factors and my experience will contribute to the work of the committee with a vision, experience, and a voice from quite a large region, shaping the future fate of security and welfare in Europe. So I would like to ask all national delegations for support to my candidacy. Thank you very much.
Right, thank you for that. Now, the other contender for chair, Mr. Hajiani from Cyprus. Would you like to say a few words?
Thank you, Mr. President. Dear colleagues, I am Kyriakos Hajiyannis. I am member of Cyprus Parliament since 16 years. It is with great pleasure to be here and ask for your support. I will appreciate your support for this post as chair of the Human Rights Committee. This commission is the most basic commission because it simultaneously serves human rights, basic freedoms, democracy, and the rule of law. Above all, however, it serves the human dimension. This is the main reason why I'm applying for this role. I want to fight for these principles that are necessary for peace and security in our world and especially in our region. I promise to continue with full dedication and with a fighting spirit in favor of our principle, day and night, all around the year. The experience I have is very essential to strengthen the human dimension and democracy in the OSCE. I will prioritize the role in our committee and spend so much time, so much effort, like the work as necessary in the first place in my life for the next whole year. Thank you very much for your support until today in my work as chairman of this committee, as a rapporteur of this committee, and as special representative for civil society. I have always worked in a supranational spirit, and I will continue to do so because the OSCE needs unity to ensure peace and security. And some of the priorities We have to strengthen the humanitarian dimension of the OSCE based on the situation in Ukraine. We have to introduce a follow-up mechanism for the election observations. We have to strengthen the dialogue with the civil society. There is no democracy without civil society, and there is no civil society without democracy. Last, in the next year, we have to speak much more about the role of the OSCE in the new world, and we have to speak between us in a collective type. Thank you very much.
Right, thank you for that. Now I'm going to ask Andreas Baker on my right here to explain the procedure for the election.
Thank you very much. Indeed, ballot papers have been prepared for the election. To vote, you are asked to please place a cross by the name of your preferred candidate. The candidate with the highest number of votes will be elected, and in case of a tie, lots will be drawn. The chair has appointed 3 tellers. They are Ms. Jackson Lee from the United States, Ms. Posio from Sweden, and Mr. Poturaev from Ukraine. I would actually ask if the 3 of you could please approach the podium now so we can oversee the process. So they will be overseeing the election process and the counting of votes. In terms of the actual procedures now, the committee will suspend for, I suggest 10 minutes, I think should be sufficient to take it. If we see that there's a need to extend, I think we can probably do so. But the idea would be to suspend for 10 minutes while the ballots are cast and the votes are counted. Then we'll resume for the result to be announced. The results will also be announced in the plenary session. So as soon as I would say in just about 1 minute, we should be ready to start the process. The ballots will be handed out here. Please bring up your committee voting card. I think it's blue in this committee. Please bring your committee voting card with you, where you will exchange your voting card for a ballot paper. You can fill out the ballot at your seat and then return to the ballot box, which is over here on my left. So I think we will suspend now. Thank you. We have 2 minutes left to collect your ballot and cast your ballot, please. So if you have any colleagues that may be waiting around out having a coffee, please call them in. We'll close in just under 2 minutes. Balloting is now closed. Thank you. Can I please have your attention? So the tellers have been overseeing the process. The result of the election for the position of chair for the committee has been Mr. Samkaradze from Georgia, 33 votes. Mr. Hajiani from Cyprus, 33 votes. 66 members have voted, and there were 0 spoiled ballots. In this procedure, our rules, Rule 36.5 it is, I believe, decides that the election shall be decided by lot. So that's what we're going to do now. 2 ballots, one with the name indicated for each candidate has been put into the box, and we'll now ask somebody to please withdraw one of the 2 names that have been put into the box. So just to clarify, the tellers have already seen that 1 ballot with indicated for each of the 2 candidates has been put into the box. The ballot has been folded. Now I will take 1 ballot out of the box, and whoever that is will be elected.
The gentleman from Georgia is the new chair, Nicholas Samkaradze.
Congratulations to the winner. What a close contest that was. Only one other bit of business. I need to, Ms. Farima Karimi is elected unopposed, so I declare that she is now vice chair. And Mr. Johan Buser as rapporteur, he was elected unopposed, so I declare him as the rapporteur. And I think that's about it for today. Can I thank you very much indeed? Sorry to keep you, but it was a close contest. It was a close contest. It's all called democracy. So thank you very much indeed, and thank you for your cooperation in the various sessions which I've had the honour to chair, and there'll be further voting tomorrow in the plenary. So thank you very much. I declare the meeting closed.